Hello all out there in YouTube, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. We're back at Georgia's house here, and she really wants to play Tug of War. Yes, welcome back to the most professional channel here on YouTube. Hey, Georgia. So yeah, it's the week of the 4th of July, and that means very busy time for me. A lot of people needing me to watch their dogs. Easy, Georgia. A lot of people need me to watch their dogs, and we need to do a lot of dog walks. It's just a very busy time for me, so I didn't have time to prepare a proper review for everybody today for this week. So I decided to just do another one of these random horror movie recommendation videos. I've done a few of these already, and I kind of have a good time doing them. They make for an easy video that I can put up for people when I'm very busy. This is just a little thing that I like to do where I just recommend a few of the horror movies that I've checked out within the past month or so, because I've come across some interesting stuff, and why not recommend it to people? Yes, I will apologize for any distractions that happen, because Georgia has no sense of timing with when she wants to play. So, anyway, so let's get on with it. I've got 3 movies to recommend to you guys, some interesting horror movies that I've seen, and I thought they were worth talking about, so let's get into it. So the first movie we got here is Call of Cthulhu, which came out in 2005. I am an H.P. Lovecraft fan. I've always loved cosmic horror, and H.P. Lovecraft was the father of cosmic horror. You know, he's done so many great horror stories. Call of Cthulhu was never my favorite book by him. It would definitely be in, like, the top 10, but my favorite H.P. Lovecraft stories are probably Shadow over Innsmouth and In the Mouth of Madness. They go back and forth over which one is my favorite, but I love both those stories so much. But Call of Cthulhu is still a great horror story. Now, I know there have been a couple adaptations of this book, all done in different ways, but the 2005 Call of Cthulhu might be one of the most faithful adaptations to his book. The thing that really caught my attention was the fact that this movie only had a $50,000 budget. Now, this is not a one-to-one comparison here, but just for the sake of trying to create some context, imagine if the Fellowship of the Rings adaptation done by Peter Jackson was done for only $50,000. You've seen all the set pieces in that movie and how well done it is, but if the budget was only $50,000, it would be a very different movie. And while the original Call of Cthulhu story doesn't have as many set pieces and doesn't have nearly the extravagant set pieces that Fellowship of the Ring has, it still has some set pieces that you can't really do with $50,000. But a $50,000 budget for the Call of Cthulhu story, that's a daunting task, because one, the movie is a period piece, because the original story took place in the 1920s, so when the filmmakers made this movie, they had it take place in the 1920s. So on the one hand, you're making a period piece for $20,000. On the other hand, it does take place in different locations. The story involves someone telling a story of the evidence that their uncle found out about something very creepy, which if you've read the book, you know what it is, but it does take place in different locations. So you have a period piece, you have a movie that takes place in various different locations, including the ancient city of R'lyeh. H.P. Lovecraft fans know what that is. The ancient city of R'lyeh is where dead Cthulhu lies dreaming. There is a scene that takes place in this ancient, bizarre city that has all these otherworldly structures in it, something that would be very difficult to do with a $50,000 budget. So you have a $50,000 budget, the movie is only 47 minutes long, which I respect, because as much as I love low to no budget independent cinema, and as much as I love supporting low to no budget independent cinema, there is a lot of it that puts so much padding in to try to pad it out to a feature-length film, and that ends up making the movie boring. But Call of Cthulhu, the 2005 Call of Cthulhu, made it only like 47 minutes long, so it doesn't even reach 50 minutes, so it has a good pace to it. Here's what I really respect about this movie. The original story takes place back in the 1920s. The original story was written back in the 1920s, so the filmmakers decided to make this as if it were a 1920s silent film. It's not just a tribute to a 1970s silent film. They actually went out of their way to make a silent film as if it were a 1920s silent film, and they did it. They literally made just a silent film, as if it were in the 1920s, and that's very impressive. And the other thing that makes this such a smart idea is it helps with the budget restraints. Okay, yes, we're making this look like a silent film from the 1920s, so that helped them work around the budget problems. Okay, the effects might look kind of cheaper, but they would look cheaper back then. The sets kind of look like what you would see in Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, especially when they get to the final location where you see all these weird structures, these weird otherworldly structures. It was a clever way to work around that. So yeah, okay, it may look a little cheaper, it may look a little dated, but it's supposed to look dated because it's supposed to be a 1920 silent film. And like I said, it's fast-paced. It's only 47 minutes long, and it's very, very loyal to the original source material, because as it was going on, I was like, oh, I remember that from the story. Oh, I remember this from the story. Oh, I remember this from the story. So this is one of the closest adaptations it's an adaptation that's one of the closest to the original source material. And again, I respect the fact that they only made it 47 minutes long. Absolutely fantastic, very surprising. Highly recommend checking it out, mostly because it is only 47 minutes long, so it's a quick sit. You're not in it for long. It goes by very fast. I'd say check that out. I think you'll like it. Now, the second movie I'm going to talk about, I saw this very, very recently, and I would love to do a full review of it. Probably a trash review, since it is considered one of those lower-budget, trashy movies, but I want to talk about it, and I will find a way to talk about it hopefully soon. I just got to get a physical copy of it. But I couldn't wait to talk about this one, so I figured I would talk about it here, but you will be seeing a full review of it, hopefully in the near future. But anyway, Shatter Dead, which came out in 1994. I talked about this a couple times. I have been diving into the shot-on-video horror movies, because back in the early 80s and through the 80s and through the 90s, there were people were able to get a hold of VHS cameras, and so you had people making movies with VHS cameras. And that's something I've recently been diving into it. I'm no expert on it. I will never pretend to be an expert on it. I've only seen a few. But I've been I've been enjoying my journey into shot-on-video horror movies. I talked about Slaughter Day in my last random horror movie updates video, and I was very impressed by that one. And I did a trash review of Night of the Zodiac, which was a tribute to shot-on-video horror movies. The movie came out in 2002, but they just made a shot-on-video horror movie. I had heard about Shatter Dead, and I had been wanting to check it out, and I finally was able to see it. It's an original idea. It's impressive what they were able to do with the budget they had, because shot-on-video horror movies did not have large budgets, if a budget at all. And the most impressive thing about it was how original it was. But again, keep in mind, it's a shot-on-video horror movie, so it's got such a small budget, it's rough around the edges. The actors in it aren't professional, high-class, Oscar-worthy actors. Forgive me for all the quotations. But again, that doesn't bother me. Everyone's putting in so much effort that the acting quality, for lack of a better word, doesn't bother me. Everyone's trying, and that is what is pushing this movie forward. So, this is a zombie movie. Kind of a zombie movie. Not your traditional zombie movie in any way, shape, or form. This is probably the most original zombie movie out there. It's just, it does involve people dying and coming back from the dead, so the best definition for what this would be a zombie movie. But don't go into it expecting your traditional zombie movie at all. We're following this woman who's trying to get home to her boyfriend, but the world she lives in now is... I don't know if it's a world any of us would want to live in. It is a world where the dead come back to life, but they don't become these mindless undead ghouls wanting to eat the flesh of the living. These zombies don't eat human flesh. They don't eat brains. They don't really have a desire to eat anything, because that desire's gone. So basically what happens in the story is, if someone dies, they will very shortly come back to life as who they were before they died. They're still the same person. Like, if I were to die, I would still be me once I came back. And so basically we live in a world now, the world has become a place where no one can die. Not a single person can die. They can die, but they instantly come back to life as essentially living corpses. What makes that such a frightening and depressing concept is the way you die is the way you have to live the rest of your immortal life. You're essentially going to be that way for all of eternity, basically. If you die as a feeble old man, you're now a feeble old man for eternity. If someone were to shoot you, you would have bullet holes in your body for eternity. If you got half your face blown off, you would now have half your face blown off for eternity and have to live that way. Because the people come back as corpses. They are alive, but they are still dead. So whatever wounds they have, they don't heal. The wounds will never heal. So whatever wounds you have when you die are never going to heal, and whatever wounds you sustained after you die and come back, they're never going to heal. And that's where the horror comes from in this story, because everybody thinks about immortality and living forever and stuff like that. This gives you this gives people immortality, but not invulnerability. So you can still get hurt, and what makes it even worse is once you get hurt, whatever injuries you get, they won't heal. You can't sit down for long periods of time because you'll start developing bruises and stuff in your body because your blood will settle. You have to get up and move around a lot. And we have this woman who's just trying to get home to her boyfriend. And while that's happening, she kind of runs into this cult led by this preacher man who's gathering the undead people and trying to create this new religion with them. And it's fascinating. When I first started watching it, for the first 30 minutes I was interested, but I was worried that it was going to have padding. Because again, I see this in a lot of low to no budget movies, which is such a shame because I love promoting this stuff. And you have the lazy ones that don't take advantage of their ideas and just fill the movie with padding, and those movies give the good movies a bad name, which is why so few people are willing to check out these things. That's why I like to praise the very good ones, like Shatter Dead. But yeah, for the first 30 minutes I was worried we were going to have padding. I was worried it was going to be one of those movies that does not take advantage of its idea and just pads out the movie with people walking around, opening doors very slowly, and then slowly walking through the door and all that. But it doesn't. It doesn't have that. After the first 30 minutes, which I was interested in the first 30 minutes, just a little worried, once we get past that and we get to this one scene, I was no longer concerned about getting a boring movie that doesn't take advantage of its idea. This movie takes full advantage of its idea and explores all these interesting avenues with this idea. But you have to keep in mind it is a shot-on-video horror movie, so it's very rough around the edges. The effects work is very impressive for a movie that obviously had such a low budget. But there is some roughness in there. In the first act of this movie, we see a fire stunt, like someone getting set on fire, really set on fire, in a shot-on-video horror movie. that takes some balls to do that in such a low-budget movie. But we're worried about the main character because she is alive, and you can understand the struggle in this because it's like, okay, if you're going to come back after you die, you probably want to come back younger. If that, you'd want to be put in a state where you can be healthy, or at least intact for the rest of eternity. So you would not want to die as a feeble old person, because I think we can all agree that nobody would want to be a feeble old person for the rest of eternity. You would not want to die as a child, because you wouldn't want to be a child for the rest of eternity. But at the same time, it is a fate worse than death, because if you get any injuries, you're never going to heal, and you have to constantly worry. You'd have to worry about that for the rest of your immortal life. So that's a very... It's toying around with that. It's like, okay, so she doesn't want to die, but she knows she's going to die, but she's torn between all this stuff. I'm not going to talk about it that much more because, like I said, I do want to do a review of this movie. I just got to try to get a physical copy of it. But I highly recommend it. I mean, this is why I am having such a good time checking out these shot-on-video horror movies. I have seen some crap, because there is some crap in no-budget filmmaking, but there's some crap in mainstream high-budget filmmaking too. That's why it doesn't bother me that much. But I do want to talk about this soon, and I would highly recommend checking it out some way, trying to find a copy to see, trying to find a way to see it. But again, this is a no-budget shot-on-video horror movie. It is rough around the edges. It's obviously rough around the edges, but it is so worth a watch if you want an original idea and one of the most original zombie movies I've ever seen. So, Shatter Dead, absolutely incredible. Check it out. Check it out. It seriously impressed me for a movie with such a small budget. So the third movie I want to talk about here, some people might say it's not technically a horror movie, and I can see that. There are definitely elements that would fit in the horror genre, but I put the movie's called White God. It's a movie from Hungary. Yeah, I can see this being a horror movie, and I can see people not considering it a horror movie. It's one of those movies, I put it in the same category as Aliens, Cruising, and The Toxic Avenger, where they're not technically horror movies, but they do have elements that can be considered horror, and they've sort of been adopted by the horror genre, because what other genre would have these movies? That's the case with White God. So, White God, we follow this little girl and her dog, Hagen. I think that's the name, Hagen. I want to watch this movie again, but I streamed it, and it's been about a month since I've seen it. But she lives in this society where people look down on mutts, on mixed breed dogs. And they're not considered to be the best dogs out there. Hagen, yeah, he's a mixed breed. He's a cute boy, and I love him. I want to squish his little face. Anyway, and the little girl has to move in with her father, who doesn't like dogs. And one thing leads to another, and Hagen ends up getting abandoned. And throughout the movie, we're watching him live his life as a homeless dog. And it's a rough movie to watch, but you don't see any animal abuse in the movie. There's no scene where you see a dog getting hit, so the animals are well taken care of in this movie. I would also like to say, and I give so much praise to the filmmakers for doing this, the director got 200 homeless dogs for this movie and made sure that every one of them got adopted. So every homeless dog that he put in this movie was given loving homes after this movie, and I gotta praise that. So I'd say support this movie just on that alone, but luckily it's also a great movie. So we do cut back and forth between Hagen living his life on the streets, the hardship he has to go through, and the little girl trying to find Hagen, trying to live her life as well. And Hagen goes through a lot of hard things. He eventually gets taken in by a dog fighting ring and gets trained to be a fighting dog, the poor dog. But again, you don't see anything. Nothing bad happens to the dogs in here. Well, bad things happen to the dogs in here, but nothing really bad happens to the dogs in here. They're not abusing the dogs for the sake of entertainment. They handle it very well, so you know the dogs were treated well while making this movie. He eventually escapes the dog fighting ring, and then he gets taken into the pound, which, of course, he's gone from this happy, friendly pet to this revenge-seeking canine. And it takes a while to get to this, but in the third act of the movie, Hagen essentially causes a canine revolt. That's not essentially, this is what he does. He causes a canine revolt, and all the homeless dogs of the city revolt against the people, and it's a very interesting movie. And then meanwhile you have the little girl trying to find Hagen. This is one of the best dog movies I've seen. I would love to do a video sometime talking about dog horror movies. I'll say dog and cat horror movies because I know I have some cat owners in the audience. I'm a dog person, but there are people who enjoy cats out there, and, you know, whatever animal works for you, that's the kind of pet you should get. I am a dog person, but I'm not going to go around telling people, oh, dogs are better than cats, because I'm not an asshole. The dog actor they got here, so well trained, and it's very, very interesting story, because the dog doesn't talk. This is not one of those movies where you hear the dog's thoughts. There's no narrator telling you, oh, this is what the dog is thinking and stuff like that. We don't have actors narrating for the dog like in something like Homeward Bound. I love Homeward Bound. That's a fun movie. But in this movie, okay, yeah, we're just watching the dogs as dogs, and we have to interpret what they're thinking. And it's not hard to interpret what these dogs are thinking because, yeah, we know what they're thinking, especially when they're going through some very bad stuff. So it is a hard movie to watch if you're a dog lover, if you like animals in general, because it does deal with the themes of animal abuse, but again, the dogs were taken very good care of while making this movie. But we do have to witness that. We do have to witness Hagen being turned into a fighting dog. And it breaks your heart because the scene that really gets to me is when he's first abandoned because the father throws the dog out of the car and drives away, and the little girl wants him back, and the dog's trying to get to the car. It's a very heartbreaking scene because that's stuff that does happen in real life. This is building up to a dog revolt where he's at a pound and he helps all the dogs escape, and then more homeless dogs join in, and he starts a canine revolt. All the dogs revolt against the people of the city. And you're rooting for them. There's not a moment where you're not rooting for the dogs. You're on their side the entire time. And the little girls, too. The father in this movie, he starts out as an asshole, but he slowly starts to redeem himself, so you do kind of care about him to an extent. But we're here for the dogs. The dogs are essentially the main characters of this movie, and we are on their side. We're rooting for them all the way. And I always get a kick out of dog-based horror movies and stuff like that, because I'm always wondering what's going through the dog actors' minds, because they're not really actors, they're dogs. You know, the dogs don't think like people do. And there's, like, the scene where we first see the dog rebellion. We see certain dogs doing certain things as a way to show chaos. And there's this one moment where you see, like, somebody was using a hose, and the dog has the hose and is, like, thrashing it around, and it's supposed to come across as this vicious thing, like, yeah, the dogs are revolting, but you're just thinking in your mind, yeah, this dog's playing tug-of-war. And I love the ending, too. I mean, because you expect a movie like this to go a certain way, and it doesn't really go that way. I don't want to spoil it here, but I really loved the ending, and I love the moment where they ended it, because there are so many movies that have such a good final image, but they don't end. It's like, you have movies where if they ended at this point, it would be a perfect ending, but they choose to go past it, and I won't say it ruins the movie, but it's just like, oh god, the ending could have been better. White God, the ending, where they decide to end, the final image, is the best way this movie could have ended. I'm just going to say that. That's all I'm going to say. Pardon me. Oh, I'm sorry. That's all I'm going to say about it. Ugh. Yep, I belched. Yeah, what do you want from me? I'm human. But yeah, White God, I would say one of the best dog movies, one of the best dog horror movies, because it is kind of a horror movie. Definitely one of the best dog horror movies. Highly recommend checking it out. You can find it on streaming, or you can find it to rent here on YouTube. White God, Out of all the movies that I'm recommending here, I would recommend this one the most, with an asterisk for Shatter Dead. I recommend all the movies in here, but I understand that Call of Cthulhu and Shatter Dead might not be for everybody. White God is a movie that I can recommend to everybody, because it's just that good. There you have it. I do apologize for not having a proper review for you this week. Again, it's just 4th of July weekend. It's a busy time for me because I got a lot of dogs to take care of, including Georgia, who went to bed, so we're just going to leave her alone. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will have, hopefully, a proper video for you next week. Put down some recommendations for some recent horror movies that you saw down below. If there's any 2023 horror movies that you've seen that you think are worth watching, put them down below, because I haven't seen too many from this year yet, and I want to get caught up on that. It's just a lot of the movies that have come out this year haven't really picked my interest, or I just hadn't had time to see them. So if there's some good 2023 horror movies you would recommend, put them down below. But any horror movie that you've seen that you think is worth checking out in the recent months or weeks, put them down below, because, yeah, let's create some more movies for people to check out. Let's create a list of more movies for people to check out. And if you like this video where I just recommend movies randomly, let me know and I'll try to do some more of these, but they'll mostly come out when I'm too busy. But on that note, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for the continued support. I truly am grateful for the fact that people take time out of their day to watch my videos, so thank you all so much for that. And until next time, I hope you're having a good week or day or whatever. And this is the Maniac, here to remind you that the Grindhouse will never die.